Travis, Travis, it's Travis over there. You still in Georgia? What are you doing?
I'm thinking about Val Kilmer's passing. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about tariffs, Val Kilmer passing. I watched Tombstone last week to commemorate, and I was watching when I was waiting for you to get on. I was watching scenes from Real Genius. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Like in the 80s? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he was a fantastic actor.
Doc Holliday was, some roles just stay with you.
Sure.
I was thinking of George C. Scott in Patton. That's one of my all-time favorite performances. But Val Kilmer playing Doc Holliday was, and nobody could have played that better. It was just a perfect performance.
Did you see how he trained for the part?
No.
He was at a conference and someone asked him, and so he has a dialogue coach who I think lives in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, he said, I want, because Doc Holliday was Georgian. And so he said, I need to train because Doc Holliday is an aristocratic, he's a Southern aristocrat. So I want to develop an accent that
that's great. Yeah.
that maps that. And so but he didn't even say much because I'm playing basically a Georgian aristocrat. And so the coach was like, say no more. And so he sent him a tape of a guy he knew, and he just basically recorded this guy for hours and hours.
Wow.
And Val Kilmer was like, look, I can't even really imitate him without laughing. But he said he would just, he listened to this guy, just would listen to him and mimic him. And he goes, he spoke so slowly. Like Doc Holliday is speaking a whole lot faster than this guy. Because like you couldn't put that on screen. Like it would take us 30 minutes just to have him say one sentence. So
Right.
I just think it's wonderful that you would call me, like, so Doc Holliday, Doc, I got 2 guns, one for each, so he just developed his whole persona around that voice.
Yeah.
So it's the process that actors, because it's a big thing, going through the training to be an actor, the process that they go through to define the character is interesting. It's a very interesting thing.
Twice in my life, I've taken theater classes for a couple of years each time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's the best thing it did for me was it made me fearless getting in front of people.
Mm.
And I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I learned a lot of those tricks. And there was nothing. I wasn't good enough for anybody to hire me, but I learned a lot and I had a really good time.
So how old were you when you did that?
So the first time was like 87. So I would have been 30.
You were 87 years old when you did that?
No, 1987, you dope.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Are you living backwards? Are you?
That's right. So I would have been 31, and then I did it again around 2000, 2001. So I would have been my mid-40s.
And did you want to go into acting, or were you like, this is just a fun skill to develop?
It's a little bit of both. If I had been a little better and gotten a couple parts, I might have gone with it. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm a ham by nature anyway, and I like that. But the Lord had in that the training to get in front of people and pull your pants down if you have to and not worry about it. Just do whatever you got to do, and that's been a really good experience for me.
Acting, I would love to act, but I would hate to live the life of an actor.
Oh yeah,
because you're either starving to death because you can't get a part,
right,
or you get catapulted. If you're talented enough, at least you get catapulted into uber fame, so you can't go anywhere. I would imagine now that's less true because in a way everybody's famous.
Yeah, that's
Famous isn't what it used to be. I mean, you know, if we have a string of videos that blows up, we'd be famous. You know,
that's right.
and everybody has a kind of platform where they can be. So if you're not you need to be doing these things, whatever these things is, whether it's acting or law or whatever, for the right reasons. You can't because you want to be famous because that's such a fleeting thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yep. So yeah, what was it? Marshall McLuhan said everyone would be famous for 15 minutes. I think he was the guy that talked about that. So there it is. So you and I are still talking about things I really like about the Catholic faith, and I don't have an urge to join the church, but what I am urged to do is adopt a lot of these things that I'm seeing that I really like, that touch me, which is a very Protestant way of looking at it, isn't it? But we're Protestants, so we get to look at it that way. But one of the things, Travis, that in the OCIA classes I've been taking, and they're gearing up for Easter, and like we all are, and there's a priest that was talking to us, and I realized, generally speaking, I feel like the Catholic Church just takes all of this, their faith, the church, with a little more solemnity and more seriousness than a lot of evangelical churches do. And I'll give you an example. One of the things the priest said was, when you come into church, when you walk into the sanctuary, don't be chit-chatting with other people. And when you leave, be silent until you get out. Then you can talk whatever you want. Don't just stand there and gossip and shoot the breeze with your friends. That's not what this is for. And that kind of put me off at first, and I thought about it. I don't really think it matters, but what I appreciated was that there's a seriousness about the faith that I see the opposite often in evangelical churches, ones that I was raised in, where it's the other way around. We really didn't take it seriously enough. And let me say one more thing, and then I want to hear what you think about this. But I remember, I think I read it. It's one of those things you get into your head and you don't remember where somebody told you or what. But I heard the best way to translate the phrase "fear God," because what does that mean? But the best way to translate that is take him seriously. And that really stuck with me. Like, yeah, it's not that we're supposed to tremble in our boots, like be afraid of him every morning, but he is like the most powerful entity in the universe and holds our eternal destiny in his hands, and to not take him seriously is kind of stupid. And that kind of resonates with me with the Catholic, what I saw, my experience. They just seem to take it more seriously, more solemnly. What do you think of that?
I think that the intention behind what your priest is saying is true. And I do agree that there is a lack of solemnity in most evangelical forms of worship.
Yeah.
To which, I would rather do what the Catholics are doing and saying, okay, when you come to the sanctuary, you're silent. And so, like the movie Sister Act, there's always these attempts among people who don't really understand, and I'm talking about Christians as well as non-Christians, but especially Christians, where they think that the way you breathe life into the church is enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Like so they don't understand the difference between praying in spirit and praying with spirit, and so the idea is I got to be just pepped up, for worship. And I just don't think that that's what God intended when he implemented, the principles surrounding how we worship. Obviously, that doesn't mean I could give all the qualifications. That doesn't mean you're supposed to be down in the dumps in church. It doesn't mean that you're not to worship with spirit, with enthusiasm. But when you have movies like We Got to Breathe Life into the Church, and the way to do is you have music.
Yeah.
And what they're really doing is they're turning church into a concert.
That's right.
And so most church worship services today, I can name several in my own hometown, they're basically concerts with the TED Talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting, Travis, because that's when I started attending the Anglican Church after a lifetime in, evangelical Protestant, Reformed. I saw it all, speaking in tongues, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I said to somebody after I'd been attending the Anglican service for a few months, I said, I feel like they're not trying to entertain me.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems with the normal evangelical service is that's almost completely unavoidable. There's always going to be some component of entertainment in there, because the service just doesn't work without that. And many people will say, no, that's not true, but I'll stand by that. I think, you're picking the songs because they sound good and they get people a certain feeling. And you just said it, it's like you're trying to evoke this excitement. Well, why are you doing that? Well, there's a certain segment of entertainment value in that. Keep people's attention.
Right.
And I really appreciate that about the Anglican Church. I know there's Lutheran churches like that when I go to a Catholic service, it's not about me, and they're not trying to entertain me. If I'm there, great. If I'm not, they're going to keep doing what they do, and
Right.
and I like that. I like that.
Yeah. What the question that you have to ask is the worship service, when it ends, am I becoming a better person as a result of what I've just done here today? Have I been saved in some way?
Yes.
To the glory of Christ because of what I've done. And most worship services, I do not think that happens, because if you're going to church every single Sunday and then you walk, and every day you're going to your car and you're speaking the exact same way you spoke before you got saved, you have the same attitudes that you had before you walked into the church on a regular basis. I can understand after the first time in church, you might not see much of a change, but if you've been going to church every week for a year, that should affect how you're living out your life during the week. And if it's not, there's a disconnect. And maybe the problem is maybe the problem is the individual going into the church. Maybe the church is doing all that it's supposed to do, but it's not penetrating your heart because
Right.
you're just not doing, and so you may need to sit down and just assess whether you really have faith. But that aside,
Right.
if you can honestly say with a clear conscience, well, I really do have faith and I'm trying to live the life, and there's just but I get entertained in church, but when I leave, I don't feel like my thinking has been altered in any way. You're going into church to alter your thinking, to renew your mind, as the scripture says.
Right.
So if your mind is not being renewed and your heart is not being changed incrementally through this process, then there's something wrong with the church.
And we're so narcissistic in this culture, Travis, that we think church should be about us.
That's right.
I today I was listening. I haven't finished it, but I was listening to about an hour-long podcast that Tim Keller did about 10 years ago, because he's one of my favorite guys, and he was talking about how, the Bible is really about Christ from one end to the other. It's not about me. It's not about us as believers. It's about
Sure.
Christ and how much he loves us and what he's done for us. But that's a real change of worldview if you start thinking that the Bible and my relationship with God and going to church and my whole Christian walk is really about me. You've just turned it into an idol. It's just one more self-help thing. You may as well, go check out a guru on the top of the mountain or do anything else like that, because you're
That's
turning
absolutely right.
you're turning your Christian faith into just any other self-help thing that's about me. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm going on somewhere else.
Absolutely. And we don't, our culture just isn't doing that. And
Yeah.
evangelical church is one of the shallowest demographics that you can run into out there. I mean, you and I love apologetics, and it's been a while since you and I have really had an apologetical discussion. We've touched on it the past couple of months, but so that proves that that's not all we're about.
That's right.
But if like get into that discussion with evangelicals in general, and you see just a whole matrix of extremes. You get the constant, well, you can't argue someone into the kingdom stuff, So that person is going to be disparaging of apologetics.
Right.
But then they all of a sudden want to quote people who have PhDs, to bolster an opinion. And then, of course, you have other people who are into apologetics, but they are not into pushing their minds at all. They stay kind of on the flat surface,
right?
And they read a couple of books, which is good to do. At least they're reading books. Most people don't even do that, but they're not asking questions like, well, what are the skeptics saying in response to this, and how can I contribute to the ongoing conversation?
Right.
Every evangelical apologist should be able to name some of the top atheists and or anti-Christian writers or speakers out there. You can't watch all of them or read all of them. That's impossible, but you have to at least know who's out there and know what are they saying about the evidences that we're offering. Are these good counter responses? And if so, maybe I should abandon that piece of evidence because I don't want to act in bad faith to the non-Christian I'm talking to.
Right.
But are you engaged on that level? And that's really where to grow. And most Christians don't want to do that. They want to get the Christian answers, but they don't want to delve too deeply. There's a lot of fear in evangelicalism.
And a lot of I think the real fear, Travis, is that they're not really saved. I think down deep, it's really about, I want to be so certain of my point of view that I know I'm saved, because I don't really have a relationship with Christ that's deep and changes me. My faith is really about, these ideas, these sort of intellectual in my head ideas. And I'm going to hold on to them so strongly because, you know what, I don't really want to go into that deep stuff. I think that's really what it comes down to.
I agree. And it's a sad thing. I mean, I think we talked about this last week, was it? We mentioned that the number of people leaving the faith is kind of plateaued.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the research is currently showing. But we're talking about Catholicism and its distinctives. Well, what your priest is serious about his faith, and most of the people that are in the Catholic Church that are serious are former Protestant evangelicals. And so these are the ones looking for the deeper faith. They're not getting it in evangelicalism, and so they found it in Rome.
Right.
That your typical Catholic who grew up in the church isn't that person. That person is as shallow as the typical evangelical worshiper. They are showing up at mass, not really listening to anything, not really drinking in the symbolism of it all. They get to that Eucharist and they head out the side door, and they don't
Yeah.
listen to they don't wait for the benediction or the closing hymn or anything. They're just in it to get that. They've been told this is the body of Christ. You got to eat this because, we have to be sanctified. So they're doing their, I don't know, they're exercising that one obligation. They're checking that box and moving on. And so they have better to do on a Sunday than sit and think about God or truly worship Him. Or
Yeah, there's shallow Catholics in their own way, just like there's shallow Protestants. I see that. I go to mass once in a while, and I watch people, and it's Travis. It's almost like they've taken a drug. Like,
yeah,
I got my high for the week, and I'll be back next week.
yeah. So it's the problems are everywhere.
Yes.
I every now and then when I was in my late wife, my first wife, she would take me to the Buddhist temple, and obviously, she and I were Christians, but we would go there to meet with her family and the extended family, friends, and all of that, and the Buddhist temple. And it was inevitable. I would see a lot of white guys and white girls, and they were so into it because, white liberals especially love the other. They just love. They love it. They love the different, the other. It's it's a way of virtue signaling. Oh, I'm doing something that is outside of the norm.
That's right.
They don't, you don't realize that in Bangkok it is the norm. So it's the norm somewhere. And so I guess if you were there, you'd be going to an evangelical church or something. It's bizarre.
That's right.
So you could see that they had this attitude, and just look at me, look what I'm doing. Well, but the thing is I will say I would go to this Buddhist temple and they had the best food I'd ever eaten. I mean, they would just show up with all this food, and very few of them would actually go into the Buddhist temple to meditate.
Oh, how interesting.
I mean, I went and observed, right? So of course I didn't go in and worship, but I went and looked, and I can't remember how many people would show up, and it wasn't like it was a weekly thing for them. So it was a big deal for people to show up. So I wouldn't have been surprised if there were like 250 people, 500 people that were milling about in the area around the temple. But at the temple, there were no more than 30, 40 at a time, and they would go in and they would do a sort of meditation practice. Then they would come out and mingle with their family and all of that stuff. And just people went in individually as they wanted to. They would do the chants, and then they would leave. And I was like, it's no different than your typical American. I want to get my fix.
Yep.
And I'm going to get out. I'm going to eat my food and just kind of do my thing. It's everywhere. This is a human thing. It's not American. It's not really evangelical. We just have this tendency to pare things down to their barest nub. And then we just want to be content with that. Okay, you're not going to bother me anymore with the deep stuff. Okay, I'm good. And that's just how we are.
My dad was a preacher, and he used to say, Satan loves Christians who get like one step from Christ and then stop there.
Yeah.
Because we think we're in, but we're really just, we're political, or we're studying end times, or we are even studying the Bible. We go to church, but do we, it's that admonition. Jesus says, get away from me. I didn't know you. Do we know him? And, when you're one step away, you think that's good enough. And you're just as far away, you can be just as far away as the worst sinner. So that's a scary admonition. Talk about taking it seriously.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a really good thought. Satan loves the person that is, you're in the light,
Yes,
but it's not penetrating to your soul.
that's right.
So you're just one step away.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep you there. You can see Christ from where you are, but you are not really, he doesn't know you.
Isn't that scary?
It's very scary. It's a
Yeah.
very terrifying thing to be in. I mean, most people, I think, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, most people who end up in hell will be those who think they're going to heaven.
Hmm.
I don't think most people that go to hell think they're going there. I've met a few. Oh yeah, I'm not gonna make it to heaven.
Wow.
I'm going to hell. And I love how complacent they are about it. I mean, I say that facetiously. I mean, that's, but they're just, it just isn't something they think about. It is so bizarre to me that
Well,
you wouldn't spend time thinking about your eternal destiny.
the one that scares me, I'm thinking it's close to that. They'll say, I don't know what, I believe in the afterlife and I know there's something there, but you know what? When I get there, I'll figure it out. Like, wow, talk about not taking it seriously,
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite lines was, I think I asked somebody one time, "Have you ever read the Bible?" And it's like, "I'm waiting for the movie."
Well, you've got it
It's
now.
good. It's a good line, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we are for most books. Wait for the movie. But what's really great about the line is it captures where most people are.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing now, that let's say that someone had a movie that basically just took you from Genesis to Revelation, right? And I guess there would be like, I don't know, 66 movies or whatever.
Yeah.
But even if you had a pared down movie like that gave you the Bible in like 3 hours, which is literally impossible, but even if you had that, and that's really the shortest the movie could be. And I don't think it
Yeah.
would be adequate, but that's the shortest the movie could be. I mean, you couldn't go shorter. You couldn't say 2 hours. Get out of here. What are you talking about? But even if you had that, I too long for a lot of people. I have teenagers that can't sit through a movie.
Wow.
I'm showing The Green Mile from ethics class.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, we're talking about the death penalty. So what better movie to illustrate the point? Guys looking at their phones,
So I read this thing about the school that they've decided that they're not going to let the kids have their cell phone the whole school day. The kids have to put it.
We're looking into that ourselves. Our middle schoolers, they're not allowed to have their phones, and they're actually doing quite well.
Good.
And I want to get rid of all computers.
Really?
I want to get rid of all of it and just go back to, you show up, you have this new invention called a pen.
Yeah.
And there's another new invention called paper. And we just write your notes.
Yeah. That's right. What people
and
say,
you're not getting on and playing games, in the middle of a lecture,
Yeah, I mean, if I was a teacher, they say, well, what are teachers going to do? Well, I know what I would do if I was a teacher. All my tests and final would be, with a pen and a paper, and here's your question, and, do the best you can. No phones, no computers.
You'll be happy to learn that I do that. I don't have any of my tests on computer.
Outstanding.
My students show up and they write all of their essays on paper. They just have to do that.
Do they protest?
I've not gotten any protests. I'm not.
Wow,
I bet let's say I quit my job and I went to Atlanta or something and started teaching there, I bet that would be an area. I'm still Albany's about 10 years behind. Now with technology, things have changed, but still in terms of attitudes, I mean, I have plenty of colleagues that still do the pen paper thing.
Yeah.
All the standardized tests, though, they've switched to computer. So, we had a cool thing that we used to do where the PSAT, we just picked a Wednesday because there are a range of days that you can do it. And so we would pick this Wednesday to do it. And so all of our students, freshmen through juniors, would all do it on that one day.
Yeah.
We even called it PSAT day. So so we would have our fall break Monday and Tuesdays, and then they would all come in on Wednesday, and we would all proctor, a section of the students doing the exam. And then in the afternoon, we knew that their brains were fried. So in the afternoon, we would do some sort of community service.
Oh, cool.
And
Very
you
good.
might go to, we have one group of kids in an old folks home and basically connecting with some of the elderly in our community, some doing work at a park or something like that, cleaning up debris, or if there was a
Yeah.
storm, just something. Or maybe even being on campus, and you would do something like fix some of the chairs in our school and clean up the area. I mean, it was just a way for them to give back, which I thought was fantastic. It was just a good day. And then we kind of essentially started our term the next day. Well, we can't do that now because to have everybody, it would be impossible to have every person taking the PSAT at that moment, at the same moment. So you have to put it off. You have to stagger it. So you have different grades different times. I've gone on and on. So, but that's just where we are as a culture. We can't pay attention, and we can't pay attention to anything from a movie to worship. So
I'll leave this on a depressing note, Travis. I'm afraid that the only thing that's going to wake us up for us to take our faith and just the world in general more seriously is some disaster. I hope that that's not true. We have to pray that that's not true, but that's kind of human nature, isn't it? I mean, in the past, that's what it takes.
Well, I think you're right. We can pick up where this left off next week. Love you, man.
Yeah. Love you, Travis. Thanks for the show. All right, brother. See ya.
Bye-bye.